Some motherfuckers always trying to ice skate uphill. I'm Liam, this is Rob, and this week we're joined by special guest Dave Old as we look back at 1998's Blade. It's a film that arguably saved the comic book movie genre after the likes of Batman and Robin had turned the idea of superheroes on screen into a bit of a joke. The one that ushered in what we would now consider to be the new era of modern-day comic book movies, and a movie that rarely gets the credit it deserves, and one that, above all else, 25 years later, 25 freaking years later, remains as awesome as it ever was. Well, for the most part, anyway. I mean, I still like this film. What are you guys giggling already?
Oh, goodness. Well, I mean, I will go into the film. I just want to say, you didn't sound northern.
No, I didn't sound northern. Yeah, just to be clear, Dave thinks that like Blade sounds northern in this entire film, which is pretty mental, but what can you do?
Okay, let me clear this up, right? I don't think he sounds northern, but he
looks northern.
He's got a pipe, you know. No, he takes the H off of Hill. So when he says it, he's all American. He's some motherfuckers always trying to ice skate up Hill.
Just to be clear, Hull. No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. We don't know where he's getting this from. We've re-listened to it. No one else is hearing
25 years. He definitely has a northern twang. just at the end. Just at the end.
Also, but anyway, yeah. Sorry,
it just upset me. 25 years, fucking hell.
I know, right? That legit upset. As I mentioned this on loads of podcasts now. I don't like numbers anymore. Anytime I do the math, anytime I hear a song, I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then I realize when it was out, that's upsetting. But then I do the math and realize how long ago that year was. That's really upsetting. But this one in particular hit me like a ton of bricks because I have such a vivid memory of watching this in the cinema. I'm like, how the fuck did that happen 25 years ago?
I'll put you at ease because as you were doing your intro, you were looking at the screen, waiting for me to turn around and say this film is shit. I'll put you at ease right now. I won't go in. I fucking love this film. I'm glad you picked this film. I've rewatched it again, and I mean, spoiler alert: this 4-star film is still really good.
It is. I'm actually more interested because, you know, Dave, you were like especially keen to be on the Blade podcast.
Oh, fuck you, so I'm going.
Yeah. I mean, you can. I mean, you know, one of the things you said is like, I rewatched the movie. I was like, well, that's a low bar. I would expect you to when we're doing a podcast on it. But is there like a reason you wanted like specifically to be on the Blade podcast, or do you have like just fond memories of it, or is it a film you love, or?
Yeah, as Rob said, it started off as a 3 a.m. drunk text to you guys that. Oh my God, I love Blade. And I do. You know, growing up, I had an A1 poster of Blade on my bedroom wall. I mean, he was a bit of an icon to me. I also had a full-length leather jacket when I was in high school, you know.
Well, I think that actually speaks to just how cool Wesley Snipes is, that he can pull off a full-length leather duster and just still look as badass as he does. Yeah. Because there's, you know, around that era, I'm not sure if it came specifically from Blade, but a lot of people used to wear very long leather jackets, myself included. And needless to say, none of us looked as cool as Wesley Snipes' Blade.
No, we did not. And I've actually gone to fancy dress as Blade, you know, the full works. I mean, the full works.
The full works.
I mean, this was a long time ago, you know. This was my appreciation of Blade. This was not.
Well, I'm actually not.
Taken the wrong way.
Yeah. I'm on the fence with that. I'm like, if it's like an appreciation thing, I don't know how I feel about it. But yes, nowadays you're not getting away with going full blackface and Blade.
Put it that way.
No, probably not. Yeah. It's amazing to think that. Again, speaks to the fact that this film's 25 years old. That you could have gone dressed as Blade. Fully as Blade, and everyone's like, this is fine, this is acceptable.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to use the Jimmy Savile excuse, you know, it was a long time ago, you know, it was okay then, but, you know.
Nobody wants to use the Jimmy Savile excuse. I mean, don't get me wrong.
That is what we're doing.
I think it'd be frowned upon nowadays if you went as full Blade, but I don't think it's quite in the same category as Jimmy Savile.
So I'm going to just leave this podcast right now before I get dragged.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I just wanted to stress, like, for me at least, looking back at this film, I was a little bit concerned how I'd feel about it because I haven't seen it for a long time and it holds such a special place in my heart. And a large part of that was the cinematic experience for me because I wasn't supposed to see this in the cinema. I was going to see The Exorcist had been re-released and I'd never seen it before. Like me and my friends, it was, again, back in 1998 when you didn't book online, you actually had to go to the cinema, queue up and get your tickets. We queued up and The Exorcist was sold out. And I was like, okay, well, what else are we going to see? And this was on, and I didn't know anything about this movie. I was like vaguely aware it was a thing, but I had no interest in it, which seems quite strange now. But I've gone back and rewatched the trailer for this film. The trailer's terrible. There's no hint of how good this movie is in the original 1998 trailer.
How'd you get into an 18?
I was going to say, were you of age?
No, you'd have been.
I was 16.
16.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was pretty tall.
Oh,
I
you're
was
massive, aren't you?
He's fucking
Yeah.
15 foot tall, isn't he? I mean,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think this might have actually been the first 18 I went to see, because the first 15 I went to see was Starship Troopers. I think this was the first 18.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when we went in to see it, we went in with no expectations. And
He walked in with his friends. They all thought he was their dad.
hey, whatever gets everyone in the door. But like that opening sequence remains one of my favorite cinema experiences of all time. Like you're sitting down, like, oh well, I hope this is cool. And then you have the club, the music, the introduction of Blade, and immediately you're like, holy shit, this film's going to be something special.
It's before that. It's the way she's driving through the city, just like traffic lights. The traffic means nothing to her, and that's as soon as the opening credits happen, that's it. She's just ripping through the city just because she wants to get to this club. I think it's great. And then you realize that Kozik, Kenny Johnson, Kozik from Sons of Anarchy, is the weird white dude in the like with his
that was again going back and rewatching it. That was my first concern, was when I saw him and I saw the hat, and I was like, man, that is 90s as fuck. But then I remembered that's how everyone's dressing now. I actually think this is probably aged less than it would have 10 years ago, because people dressed in 90s shit would have looked really out of place in like 2010. But in 2023, you see people dress like 90s kids all the fucking time. Yeah. So him dressed like that, I'm like, if I saw a kid dressed like him in town now, I wouldn't bat an eyelid. But I mean, once you get past that, I really do think it is, or at least it was for me and my friends who went to see it, was when the music kicked in. Because again, that kind of music, this film predated The Matrix. And again, going back and rewatching it, you can see the influence it had on The Matrix as clear as day.
I mean, did it though? Because
with the use of like
The Matrix whilst this was being released.
It feels like, I mean, if it might be by chance, but the use of like techno dance music, I'm not sure what the genre is. I just call it all dance music. But the use of dance music, the choreography feels like it's in the same kind of ballpark. It doesn't have like bullet time and stuff, but that use of kung fu. And there's even a scene where Stephen Dorff is sitting there listening to music while he's like, I don't know, he's got that weird computer room. Yeah. That totally reminds me of the scene with Neo. It's exactly the same kind of like chill dance music as somebody's looking at a computer. It's so 90s.
I had the vibes all the way through the film, exactly the same as you. There's a scene at the end, just after Whistler's died, and Blade's going 100%. To get the girl. And all the security guys come down a little corridor, and it's almost like the
pillars are there and everything.
And they don't hide behind the pillars, it's not the same. But as soon as you see that, it looks the same. And
it really does.
Moments like that all the way through the film.
I wouldn't say that. I get what you're saying, but I don't think The Matrix turned around and just took everything. Because Blade.
I'm not suggesting that.
So there's two different aspects there, isn't it? Like,
are you saying that it didn't influence The Matrix because you think The Matrix is shit?
No, I don't think The Matrix is shit. I know The Matrix.
Yeah, so you're calling a 5-star action masterpiece shit. Just to be clear, I just want to clear that up. Like
action masterpiece. I fell asleep.
Well, yeah, because I don't know, you're insane. We're not going to get into The Matrix and the fact that it's a masterpiece. Like, let's just leave it at that. Jesus Christ.
When we do The Matrix, I'll tell him what I really feel about it. I just want to.
that is a horrible take, an absolutely horrible take. But yeah, it really was.
Sorry, go back, because again, you did your usual thing. You just went off on a tangent, and we were talking about the beginning. Did you know who the woman was?
Oh, is she Spanish? Oh God, I did have a name written down. I'm going to say Ali Jova.
No, that's the blonde woman.
That's the blonde woman that she goes. So the woman who's driving the weird 90s looking dude is Tracy Lords, ex-porn star Tracy Lords.
Oh, no, I didn't realize at all.
Yeah, who had a problematic career as a porn star because
Jesus Christ,
she did about.
She had no genitals.
Well, she did about 15 films before they realized she was 15.
Oh, yeah, that is. I was going to say what could possibly be a problematic pornographic kind of career, but yeah, that's
all right. Just getting to porn. Nobody asked her age.
Jesus Christ, we've gone down some weird rabbit holes very early in this podcast.
Oh, make this whole thing go down real. Like again, sticking to the sexual route. Donald Logue, you see quickly at the beginning of the film, Quinn, who again was only meant to be at the beginning of the film, but they loved him so much they kept him on. Maybe a few. I've watched this film numerous times, and I've always missed until this rewatching the weird get down and suck my dick moment.
You never noticed that?
No, not until.
Oh, that's really. I mean, they don't try and hide that. That is right there, isn't it?
Yeah. Just
It's weird because I know I can see why they kept him in the film because he's like a big character, but he felt a little bit too much.
That's where he was, yeah.
Yeah, by the end of the film in particular, he felt a little bit too much like Uncle Eddie from National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Like he just had that vibe. I was put this way, I was very glad that he got killed finally at the end of the film, and I know that was the running joke. Yeah, well, that was cool though.
They make him really hard to kill. You know, he loses limbs all the way through, and then instantly off with his head.
Yeah,
but I mean, the best part for me for Donald was definitely him explaining how he's going to be a naughty vampire god.
Yeah, I'm a naughty vampire.
I by that point I was ready for him to die, but that's actually my issue with this film is like looking back, because like one of the big questions most people ask when they think about Blade is what's better, Blade 1 or Blade 2? If you say Blade 3, you can go fuck yourself. Blade 3 is an absolute...
Blade 3 does not exist.
Yeah, Blade 3 is a legitimately horrendous film, which is super upsetting when Blade 1 and 2 are both so good.
I mean, as soon as you cast Ryan Reynolds in a film, it's going to be shit anyway.
I quite like Ryan Reynolds. I do that after they took up Wrexham yesterday.
No, it was never going to be a serious film.
Yeah,
and it loses something trying to play Blade off against a clown. Effectively, it just didn't work.
Yeah, it's just he was like miscast. But then everything about the tone of that film, I don't think Ryan Reynolds is bad. I just think he doesn't belong in that film. Doing, like you said, the Ryan Reynolds thing.
A lot of them don't belong in that film. I mean, you had Natasha Lyonne in there as well, as the blind woman.
Yeah.
The whole iPod thing is horrible. It's just a horrible film, so let's just leave it at that. But between 1 and 2, I was like, I always had, like, looking back, I was like, well, I preferred 1. But I think it was just the impact. And the reality is, going back and watching it, is that what this film has is great bookends. Like, the opening sequence and the end of this film are both absolutely fantastic. And Blade at his best. The second film is a better movie, and which isn't a surprise. Like, let's be clear, number 2 is directed by Guillermo del Toro instead of Stephen Norrington. He's a better director, and it's a better shot film. But number 2 doesn't have anything quite as memorable as the opening or closing in this film, and it also has Norman Reedus as fucking Scuzz, which is just horrible. He's fucking, like, you talk about certain things in this film which, like, age the movie. Nothing ages Blade 2 more than Norman Reedus playing Scuzz.
You're all right.
None of those things are the worst thing in Blade 2. The worst
CG.
thing is the CG of the guy randomly like bending and flopping around.
Whilst fighting Cat from Red Dwarf. Yeah,
and that's a shame because that scene actually is fundamentally amazing. Like with all the lights in the background, you're like when they're actually being shot as human beings, it's amazing. But the moment it goes to CG, you're like, oh no. Oh dear, that doesn't work at all.
I'll give you the fact that there's an argument for Blade 1 against Blade 2. Mm-hmm. But I honestly think the Blade 1 is the better film.
Yeah.
Like, because you get the it's the thing with this, isn't it? It was lower budget compared to a lot of the other films. And then they said, oh, this worked. Let's do another one. Let's blow it up. And Blade 2 has the better action and things like I'm giving that. You got the vampire killers, the whatever they were called, the Night Stalkers, things like that. But Blade 1 is just more grounded. It's grounded for a vampire film, but it feels grittier. Yeah, it feels better. Do you know what I loved as well? Again, sticking to the beginning of this film, the weird flash. Because if you watch this film the first time and you didn't know who the bad guy is or anything like that, you get that first little glimpse of Stephen Dorff just as he walks past you. There's that look. And you just think the guy's an asshole. Then you realize, actually, he is going to be the big bad. I love that little introduction. There's no big thing, oh, this is the guy, he's the guy running the club. He is running the club, but you don't know that. He's just a dude walking through at this point. And you get flashes to all of the sub-villains as well within that. Because you get then Tracy Lords going up to the Spanish woman you said, who had a real hard time with English in this film.
Her accent.
She like, again, another one of those things that ages this film is just everything about her ages this film. Because she looks like she's from a late 90s dance music video. Like, it's a rough look. And then it's not just her. I was like, is that the best take you've got? Surely it wasn't written down like that when she delivers those lines. It's fucking horrible.
When she says at the end about the pure blood, why are you sweating? And you have to go, huh?
And no, she delivers a line when she's going after, she's like, I'm about to kill you now or something. It's just like, ugh.
I'm about to kill you now.
It's rough. It is rough. Sorry, but she is bad in this film.
So I love those little introductions because you get and then, I mean, they're young as well. That's the one thing that vampire films up until this point didn't the vampires being young as the villains. You had Fright Night. He's lived thousands of years. He's old. You have like Nosferatu, who's just a bald fucker. Like all the Dracula, so you didn't really have that young, I guess, hip villain. Hip, I'm fucking 40, but do you know what I mean? So
that Deacon Frost sure is a hip villain.
That's the thing, isn't it? Like you said, all the older guys, all the purebloods, are all on the council. They're all terrified of them.
Yeah,
and as it turns out, fold like a deck of cards. As soon as one dies, they're all like, "Fuck this! I ain't fighting you guys. I'll just die."
Yeah, they were pretty pony, weren't they? That whole thing, because I like the concept of it, that you've got like the purebloods who are kind of your traditionalists who want to just keep things as is. And Deacon Frost is ostensibly like a teenager. Obviously, he's older than that, but he's like the young team coming through. Who's like, oh, well, you're not a pureblood. And I like that whole kind of purebloods versus those who've been turned and stuff, and the kind of divisions. It's slightly underplayed in this, but it's like, what do you want it to be, a 2.5-hour film? But I think that's a great point. The fact that Deacon Frost isn't your average vampire. I guess like I guess you did have like Lost Boys before this, but having them both in the same film, the kind of the young, like the kind of the old guard and the young team, you rarely got that on screen before. It was usually either one or the other, I guess.
I loved as well, like all these traditional vampire things getting thrown out here. The fact that he's Deacon Frost is in the middle of New Orleans in the daytime, and he's got like factor 1000 sun cream on. Like, I've never seen that before.
It's absolute nonsense. That is maybe like, that's like almost a jumping the shark moment for this film. Because just be clear, and one other thing I want to mention, just because we're bringing up Stephen Dorff, is like, Deacon Frost is one of the coolest cinematic names ever. It's just a cool name. And then his battle is against one of the worst named characters of all times, Dragonetti. I kept hearing it as Dragon Eddie.
I always thought it was as well.
It's like, who the fuck is Dragon Eddie? Jesus Christ. But yeah, like they put him out in the sun. You know, he just almost immediately explodes. But those guys, because they're wearing Factor 100, and when they were in like the bike suits and they put the mask down, I kind of accepted it. But when he just shows up in the day and has a face-off with Blade because he's got his Factor 100 on, I'm like, that surely can't be it. Because they're always talking about, oh, well, that's like the goal, that we can go out in the day. It's like, well, you already can. You just have to put on a bit of makeup. It's not the end of the world, is it?
So I know between the three of us, I'm the comic guy. I'm the one who's read most of the comics. So it's what I said about Deacon Frost being in the film being cool. He's actually the old guard in the comics. He is an older guy. He's lived thousands and thousands of years and stuff. So the fact they made him this, I guess, cooler guy and younger, I think works for the film. I mean, yeah, the whole Factor 1000 thing is a bit stupid. And things like that.
It's dumb as... Yeah.
But again, you kind of had the bullet time there, mind.
Yeah.
So maybe it does give. Okay.
I mean, dude, like if you take a side,
stole everything from Blade, but
I was legitimately, and I know the conversation, the fact that you don't like The Matrix, but rewatching it,
I'll go back now before somebody. I was winding you up.
Oh, thank God. Well, anyway, besides that, I was amazed going back watching this how much it felt like The Matrix. Like they had those overlapping kind of tonal things and stuff. I was just like, there's no way that somebody didn't watch this movie and at least think, oh, we can make some changes for The Matrix. It might just be coincidence, but they really felt very similar to me. And maybe it is a big part of that is the use of music, which I think is a massive part of this film. It was one of the first movies I ever went out and bought the soundtrack. And as I said, the choreography in that opening sequence is great. But what I remember is the music kicking in. And then, of course, you have the music and then you have that amazing introduction of Blade. I mean, we've talked about Stephen Dorff a lot, but the reason this movie works is because you totally buy into Wesley Snipes' Blade. And it's like everyone's covered in blood. I don't know how he didn't get a drop of blood on him in that scene. It's unbelievable.
That's the way that Rachel said. Yeah. Why is he's so pristine, but they were just raining blood everywhere?
Dude, it's one of the coolest cinematic intros ever. Like when I think of like cinematic intros, I always go back to like Casino Royale. I know that sounds weird because we've seen James Bond on screen loads of times, but you got to remember this, it's not the same, but this film had to convince people that comic book movies worked on screen again. That 89 Batman was a long time ago. There'd been a long run of really bad superhero films, and the genre was dead on screen. It's like, I mentioned Batman and Robin, but there was Steel, there was The Shadow, there was, what was the one with Billy Zane? The Phantom. Yeah. All these films were dog shit.
They had the Captain America one, 91 Captain America one as well.
Yeah. All these films bombed. The genre was dead. And then this film's got to convince you that a superhero film can work on the screen again. And it convinces you in the opening seconds, in the same way that everyone had those doubts about Daniel Craig as Bond. And then within 10 minutes, within 3 minutes of the film starting, you're like, oh no, this guy's Bond. And in the same way, you're like, oh, this guy works on screen.
Because I am not a fan of Marvel films, of any of the genre, really. It's just not my cup of tea. I hate all this modern stuff now where it doesn't really matter how good the film is. It's going to be $1 billion box office hit, regardless.
Wow, not at the moment, but okay.
But that's what's needed, though, isn't it? That's the crazy thing.
I loved Blade. So, I love the fact that this film was made, but it's slightly bittersweet that it saved a genre and churned out this mass-produced bollocks, which is constantly coming out.
Sorry. Things I wanted to bring up. The first one, we're sticking to Blade. What makes Blade cool in this? Is it the character, or is it Wesley Snipes?
It's both. The character is fundamentally cool, like as you see him on the page. But you've got to translate that. There's a lot of very cool superhero characters who didn't work on screen for one reason or another. But like I said, as soon as you have that opening sequence, the camera pans up and you see him in the duster and he's got the haircut, the sword, and of course his physicality. He knows martial arts, he knows his stuff.
So would he have been cool because Blade in the comics, Eric, he's British. Mm-hmm. So would it have been cool with a British accent?
It could have been if you got the right actor.
Idris Elba.
But Idris Elba, don't get me wrong, Idris Elba is cool, but I'm like, how many people are 1998 fucking Wesley Snipes cool? That's the thing.
Wesley Snipes, make him British. Wesley Snipes with the British accent.
TV show as well, wasn't there? I mean,
with Sticky Fingers.
Yeah. Oh, dude.
Was he cool?
No, his name is Sticky Fingers. If your name is Sticky Fingers, it's not cool. I don't know, as an old man, is that a sex thing or is that a crime thing? Either way, it's not cool and it's very upsetting.
But it is cool because his fingers with a Z.
Oh, well, yeah, that's fucking
so
legit.
My second point I wanted to raise, you said about the soundtrack. Mm-hmm. All I could think, and I know that it's different genres, but when I heard the music, especially like the music that Deacon Frost is playing in his ears while he's doing his magic computer, as you said, from Human Traffic, when Coop is selling music and the guys come and go, any jungling guy? And he plays the jungle. That's all I could think about.
Well, I don't think there's actually...
The guys just listen to the jungle in the middle of Cardiff.
I hope nobody who's into dance music listens, because I'm pretty sure there's no actual jungle in any of that soundtrack. But I know what you mean. I'm uncultured in the ways of dance music. But to me at least, it just sounded cool. And I think, again, the fact that you didn't really get that on screen. And it's the same with that last sequence where you get that really perverse sex sequence with Blade and what's the girl's name? Jesus Christ. Blade feeding off Karen. Yeah. Where it's like, I know, vampirism as a metaphor for sexual disease or sexual interaction isn't new. And they don't go for it quite in the same way that, say, like Thirst by Park Chan-wook goes for it. But that sequence where they keep cutting back to him and it's like he's humping her every time he sucks the butt. You go from that, we're just going to have this moment of metaphor and traditional kind of vampirism on screen. And then straight away they cut to the I've been struck by lightning track. And it's the moment when he cuts off Quinn's head, the sunglasses flick around, he catches it, the music kicks in, you're like, well, this is going to be fucking amazing. Yeah. And it is. Again, up top, I don't think I'd seen anything like that on screen before.
Picture, just before all that happens, picture two guys coming in going, any jungling guy?
You're saying it now, I think it would work. And
the third point I wanted to mention, it's a pity we're recording this early on a Sunday morning, because next time we need to do a drink, because I want to play Hey You Guys Bingo again. Every time Liam says cinematic, I want to take a drink. Because I'd be pissed right now.
They won't last long.
Yeah.
Well, we are talking about cinema, but whatever, that's fine.
And you say about the music, it's not my cup of tea at all. I'm a big...
I wouldn't listen to it at home, usually.
I tell you what, it does fit the sequence perfectly.
It totally does.
And I loved it. I really, really enjoyed the soundtrack to it. But again, it's not something I would normally listen to.
I wouldn't go out and buy it, but it fits perfectly for the aesthetic of the film. It fits really well.
And it does. And it was one of the things, again, I mentioned the fact that going back to this, I was always like, oh, is it going to feel like a late 90s film? And that wasn't the issue. I mean, there are moments in this film where, and you had it with a lot of films in the late 90s, that they felt like they were directed by guys who came from the music video industry. And that was true of a lot of films. And you do get that occasionally, like that kind of, there's a lot of quick editing, forced perspective. There's like that use of filters. There's some films that just look 90s because of the color on screen, because of the filter that they use or whatever. But there's a few moments in this where I think there's like a tail sequence, which should be boring. And I like the fact that they're trying to make it interesting, where Blade's following someone around. But in that, it goes full night. There's like reduced frames, there's sped up timing. It's like they make a boring sequence interesting, but also make it incredibly 90s.
Yeah.
And you do get a few moments of that in the movie.
That as well. It almost turned slightly comic-y. It was just like those frames from a comic, and I wonder whether that was a nod back to the Blade comics.
Well,
I thought it was just a nod back to 1998, personally.
I mean, I'm not too sure that they had that comic aesthetic going for it, but like I said, it felt really nice. Like all the blurry cars going past you. And
yeah. But to come back to your point, though, about the whole comic book thing, and I find it interesting the fact that you're not into comic book films, but you like this. I think it's because they were trying. I don't think they made any suggestion that they were like, oh, this is a comic book movie. I think they've looked at comic books and said, that's a cool character. What this movie feels like, right from the moment it starts, is a horror film. And it's from the moment you see the New Line Cinema logo up on screen and it's all dripping in red. There's nothing comic book about that. That's a horror movie. Well, and that's I think, what they're going for.
They didn't say, oh, we're going to make this a comic book movie. They just took a character. And because
exactly.
Blade originally as well is just a character in a book called The Night Stalkers. So he's just a character in that. So he's not a standalone on his own.
Okay.
And so I don't think they took it like the big thing now is comic book movie onto screen. We're gonna, but
they're all 12s.
Yeah,
so there's very little violence, and there's very little swearing. Whereas I like the fact that this is a full grown movie.
Thing. And that's grown when you hear things like they're bringing Blade back. They're going to do Ghost Rider. They're going to do Daredevil, Punisher. All these darker people are getting murdered. People are getting maimed. Heroes, anti-heroes, but on screen. Oh, are you okay? Do you want a plaster? It's not going to work for the Disney.
Well, that we talked about at the end,
aesthetic, but it just I don't think
it's all the mouse's fault.
Yeah.
Well, it's not, it won't work. And I think one of the more reassuring things that's happened recently is the fact that they've gone back to the drawing board with a Mahershala Ali version of this, where they were like, clearly it's just too family friendly. And early doors in this, that this isn't they're not selling it as a comic book film because they know nobody's heard of Blade in 1998. Nobody gives a fuck if this is a comic book movie. They're selling this as a horror film. They've just got a cool character. And you know it from the moment when like Quinn is being burned to a crisp. And he's on the hospital bed, and they don't shy away from opening him up. It's proper horror stuff. Then when he runs out, and the cops show up and try to shoot a Blade, and he's like, "Motherfuckers, are you out of your goddamn mind?" It's just like, oh, this is not a comic book movie. This is just fucking Wesley Snipes being a badass.
Oh my god, he's so. Can we just mention really quickly the gear? Like Blade's blade, his gun, that is some of the coolest gear in cinematic history, to quote Liam.
It is the only one that I have an issue with is just like, I think everyone remembers the Duster, everyone remembers the gun, which is awesome, and obviously the sword. What doesn't get any love is the 1968 Dodge Charger. It's so badass. I was trying to figure out why doesn't it get any recognition, and I think it's because it's the same car that they used in Bullet. So it's always going to be the Bullet car. It's never going to be the Blade car.
Yeah, take a break. Dave's favorite car?
1967 Ford Mustang.
I thought it was a Dodge Charger. Your favorite car?
Oh, you bought me the Mustang.
Yeah, I don't fucking.
I'm glad you built that. Take a breath. We got something here. It's like, what's your favorite car? The VW Beetle. Well, okay, fantastic. Cheers for that, Dave.
My wedding car was a 1967.
I wasn't invited. Cut this shit out.
It's too late.
What friend you are.
Yeah.
But no, I totally agree with what you said there. Like his get-up, and Wesley Snipes obviously sells it. But they've nailed it with the look. And you'll know better than me as to how accurate that is to the comic books.
Yeah.
But on screen, it just works.
Absolutely. Speaking of the guy that made his gear as well, because we haven't mentioned Whistler, who's played fantastically by Chris Christopherson. I love that name, by the way.
Great.
It's a great name.
Every
Oh,
time.
both names, Chris Christopherson and Whistler, are just both cool names.
When
Certainly
I-
better than fucking Scuzz, put it that way.
When I see Blade Whistler on screen, he's just an angry old drunk. I picture he's going to be you. Look at the day.
Well, I do like tinkering in my shed.
Yeah.
Yeah, just need to grow out that beard a little bit, that's all.
Oh,
Well, no, he's
No,
I actually think
the
he's like
character
this,
Whistler
Mhm.
is not a comic book character.
which
So-
is strange because he's like, I think he's secretly one of the MVPs of this movie. And a big part of that,
No,
like,
no,
I think a lot of younger people don't
Brought
know.
into the comics
Mhm.
because Whistler was introduced in the 1994 Spider-Man cartoon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they introduced Whistler because obviously because they brought Blade into that as well for an arc because he was fighting Michael Morbius,
Mhm.
and they brought Whistler in to say, "All right," and they loved him so much they gave him a little comic book arc and then brought him straight into the film, and then Whistler just became massive after that. So it's really it's same with Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn from DC, she was
Mhm.
brought into the Batman TV show and then brought onto the screen. So she wasn't
Mhm.
a comic book character to begin with as well. This is really interesting that one of the things that make the Blade film really good is not a comic book accurate character. It's just something that was brought in on screen somewhere else. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
Chris Christopherson, the whole father figure, you're just a tool, but you're not a tool thing,
Mhm.
is absolutely great.
Oh,
Like,
it's the
he's
most.
a tool, but
Yeah.
but he's not, is he? He's like his kid at that point. So I think it's really
It might be the most masculine relationship on screen ever depicted. It's so masculine, like right down to when Whistler dies. It's like walk the fuck away. Like they just have these like little hints, these little looks at each other to suggest that they care. But they would never tell each other. They would never tell each other. They're too
Can't look at
manly.
him, can he?
No.
He's mopping the blood off him. He never looks at it. When he pulls the sheet off him, he doesn't
Yeah.
look.
Oh well, what happens? Because you know what
Terrifying.
happened, don't you?
What happened if he did?
The emotions, he might get that single tear going. He can't get that single tear going, Blade. He knows if he looks like, oh no, I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna cry.
I'd be like, you might be like Bruce Willis on Friends. Once he starts crying, he never stops.
Yeah.
All I could
It's
think
hard
of
to
was
fight
the
the undead. Then.
Whistler keeping that shotgun in that light as well.
Yeah.
Like just tips that light over and a massive fucking shotgun falls out. Like how would you think to put it up there?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's the thing. Like, it's not just like the character is cool. It's like I think even people of our generation, and certainly people younger, they won't know much about Chris Christopherson. He's like he had this amazing career in the 70s. Obviously, he's been a musician for a long time, but he was a massive star in the 70s, and he totally brings that onto the screen. Like he adds that presence. I always, we mentioned it a bunch of times on this podcast, the Wayne's World 2 moment, when they shuffle the old guy out and then they bring in Charlton Heston. They're like, this is like the Charlton Heston moment where you have like a character who might have been whatever, but they're like, no, dude, let's get fucking Chris Christopherson. And do you know what? One of the reasons he's so good on screen is because you buy him as a badass. Like, okay, don't get me wrong. He is terrible with both needles and petrol. Absolutely useless. I've never seen, it's like every time he uses a needle on someone, it's like he's trying to stab it through their eyeball. And you would think he might be better with cars. He pours most of the petrol over the side of the car before lighting a cigarette. I know it's supposed to be because he's a badass. I just think it's clumsy. But
You wouldn't do that now with the way petrol prices are, would you?
no, not a fucking chance. But the one thing he does, and two things he does so convincingly are drink and smoke. Like, so if at one end of the cinematic spectrum, you have Tom Cruise smoking on screen, the least convincing smoker on screen maybe ever seen. At the other end of the spectrum, you have Chris Christopherson caning cigarettes and throwing back JD. He just
wasn't even
looks
in the
fucking
script.
badass.
No.
He just brought those with him.
Exactly. You totally buy into that, though,
Even
don't you?
Norton's like, oh, fucking hell, he's smoking again. All right, just let him get on with it. It's fine. What's he
Oh,
doing with that
unbelievable.
petrol? It's real petrol.
But one of the things we have to bring up if we're like looking back at Blade is the fact that it just never quite got the recognition it deserves. And one of the strangest ones is its place as a black superhero movie. And I appreciate we're three white guys doing a podcast, so I don't want to go too far down this route. But it felt like when Black Panther came out, everyone's like, oh, finally, a black superhero film. This film's black as fuck. Like, he is a black superhero. He's so fucking... Like, he kicks the shit out of a white cop in the street in broad daylight. Like, that's fucking awesome. Like, how can there not be black guys in America cheering at the cinema screen?
He was holding a cop against a cop car, right, with a blade sticking out the top of his coat, and no one bats an eyelid. He's bashing his head on there. He runs away, he pulls his gun out, and everyone freaks out, as you would. He's shooting in the street.
Mhm.
But then he puts his gun away, and everyone just carries on walking around perfectly calm, like it's nothing.
Yeah.
Like, I know it's an American street. I mean, this might happen all the time, but
Yeah, but it wouldn't if it was a fucking black dude beating the shit out of a white cop. That's the point.
It's like he's got this glamour thing, isn't it? That people, because they have this. I don't know if they actually meant to do it like this, but they have this power where the vampires can make people forget things and stuff like that. So it's sort of like a glamour. If this happens,
Well, there is.
I mean,
there's
I might
almost
be
a
trying
hint
to pull
to-
at straws.
No. I think there's something to that because I'm not sure if it was intentional or not. But there's a sequence when, and again, this whole idea that it's supposed to be in New Orleans, I never quite feel like it's in New Orleans. I know a lot of it was shot in LA. But he's walking down the street, and everyone else is just like a whatever dude. And he's like dressed in all black, the duster and stuff. And he stands out like a sore thumb, and no one gives him a second look. And almost, again, it reminds me of the woman in the red dress from The Matrix.
Yeah.
When it's like, oh, are you looking at me or are you looking at the woman in the red dress? No one's looking at the dude in the black duster. And I think there might be, it's not made clear in the film, but it feels like they're hinting towards that at least, that he's walking down the street and it's almost like people don't see him. But again, it's never made
Raised
clear.
the question about this being one of the first black superheroes and people skipping over it for Black Panther. Could it be the fact that people don't see him as a superhero? He's just.
I think that's a big part of it. And I think actually the other part of it is the fact that when people look back at Blade and the narratives surround it, I think people just see it as the savior or the start of modern day comic book. Like, this is the movie, that restarted comic book movies on screen. And even then it kind of gets looked over because a lot of people would go, oh, well, it was X-Men. In 2000 or whatever it was. But the reality is X-Men only got made because this movie was a hit. If this movie flops, X-Men doesn't exist, then Spider-Man doesn't exist, blah, blah, blah. But it's just odd that it just kind of sits there. And I think, to your point, the fact that it doesn't feel like a comic book movie means that it's often overlooked in the narrative, I suppose.
I do, like you said as well, the fact that you're kicking the shit out of that copper, and that copper was problematic anyway. He wasn't a good actor. But
no, he's quite bad. Yeah, he was
the worst. I think the worst actor in this film is gotta be Karen.
Oh, dude, that's so harsh. I think Karen's good.
I think she's awful in this film. I don't
Dude, over Mercury. Dude, she's not worse than Mercury.
Mercury's worse.
Who's Mercury?
The blonde woman.
Oh, okay.
Jova.
Just the character.
That's a hot take. I think I was one of my takes from this was that
they brought her in just to create a new
serum
and stuff and she's the introduction to that world. I get it. You always have to have an introduction to the world when you've already got a world that's set. So you need an introduction into the vampires. I get all that, but I just think this film would have been fine without her.
Oh, I think you're being pretty. I actually thought, like, looking back at this when I was rewatching it, was like, wait, where did she go? And apologies if I'm slaughtering a name, but the actress Mbushi Wright, she was in Dead Presidents before this, which was a pretty big hit. Then she was in this, and I actually think she's really good in this and holds her own towards the end of the film. But then she just kind of disappears from. She's in like a few TV shows and stuff. But I think you watch this film and think, oh, she could have potentially been a breakout star for this film, but it's never quite happened. But I thought she was quite good.
Would have worked without. If you just had Whistler and Blade, I think you would have worked without. I don't think you needed her. There was just all this introduction about I need a new serum and things like that. And why? Why do you need to go into the whole serum side of it?
Well, that's a massive part of the plot, though.
She sort of explains why the vampires are different at the beginning because they're.
Yeah, I just don't think it's.
It just adds little bits of storyline.
Mm-hmm. You need to explain all that.
I think you need more Pearl myself.
I was literally about to go into that. It's like if you're trying to find a character who isn't needed, it's like, why does this film have Jabba the Hutt in it? It's like it's so odd. But like maybe after Blade 2 and 3, it makes more sense because you get stranger characters. In this, you have humans and you have for the most part, very traditional vampires, and then you have this giant computer woman thing. What the fuck is she about? Like, that was so weird to me going back and rewatching it.
She could be more problematic as well because when you see her, she's got blood bags around her. Originally written in the script, it was bodies of dead children. Yeah.
Oh shit.
Yeah. Just scattered around. So it could have been.
Although I think the reason we all, or at least I, forgot about Pearl like so soon after is because that kind of leads into the final sequence of this film. And I had so many, I'd never really kind of questioned it in the past, but my first question was, where is the temple, this underground temple? I really didn't have any idea. 2, what the fuck is up with Deacon's plan? His plan is to like bring La Magra or whatever it is back from, I don't know, the dead or the underworld, whatever.
Right, so we lost Liam for a minute then, because he lives in the arse end of nowhere, so his internet probably, the hamster died on his internet. So,
Edinburgh. I live in Edinburgh. The capital city of Scotland, yeah, sure.
You're in Cardiff, you're the arse end of nowhere. So I think you were talking about La Magra. So I'll try and edit you so it sounds a bit better, but just go from La Magra for me.
I very much appreciate it. No, that was one of my big issues returning to this film was Deacon's plan, basically. Like, you know, bringing back the blood god La Magra. The idea is that it turns everyone. It's like a storm which kind of goes over the world, turns everyone into a vampire. What do vampires then eat? Like, what's his end game there?
So there's a little hint of that, and they bring that into Blade 3. It's human blood bags. So there is a little hint of it, and I think it's more in like a deleted scene that they're going to have humans just strapped up in a warehouse, just feed it. Like, do you remember in Blade 3, you see that where they got yeah. So that was the actual end game.
So they're going to have warehouses full of humans tied up a lot like the Matrix, then.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing. Like that's in this, his plan just sounded like everyone was going to be turned into a vampire.
My question about La Magra is La Magra just is La Magra a thing? So does La Magra take over Deacon and become La Magra, or is because he still acts like Deacon?
Yeah, but she's the woman says to him, doesn't it, Frost, and he says, "Not anymore."
Yeah, okay.
But I'm assuming Frost is gone, and La Magra now owns that body.
Yeah, but he has all the memories because he knows about Blade's serum. He knows about Blade.
Yeah. I think it was just like La Magra takes over the body, is fully aware of of his character and, like you said, his memories and stuff. I think there's like an alternative end to this film where La Magra is much more of your big CGI kind of blob thing at the end.
Yeah, and it's more of a. I have seen it. It's a tornado.
Yeah, it's literally what he said. A storm kind of
just going around, and I prefer what they've done on screen.
Oh, 100%.
But also,
like even if you did it by today's standards, I would prefer what they did on screen. Like one of the
CGI
big issues,
a little bit problematic, especially the whole top half and bottom half connecting again via blood.
It's the blob for me when he injects the blue stuff into people and they start to expand and that really starts to show his age.
Do you know what it looks like? Big Trouble in Little China when that dude holds his breath.
Yeah, it does. It does. Exactly. But it doesn't look as good. It doesn't look as good as that because it's CG, and this movie's at its worst when it uses CG. Like you're saying, similar with Blade 2. Like when the vampires disappear, I guess why you had to use it for they use CG. It kind of makes sense. It doesn't look fantastic. It's a hurdle you need to get over when going back to watching this. Is that some of the CGI is pretty pony, but luckily it's used sparingly. And even the bit, like you said, where his body separates and the goop kind of like pulls him back together, and you get that cool moment when Wesley Snipes turns back around and mouths, "What the fuck?" But all I'm thinking when I'm watching that sequence is, oh, thank God they didn't do the alternative of having the big blood god goop thing. And even if you can get the CG to work, modern day cinema has proved that's not the way to go. Like, I know, Dave, you don't watch a huge number of superhero films, but a massive problem with the majority of them is that for the final act, they go and have the big, huge bad guy. Like even films which were well received, like Wonder Woman, the final act of Wonder Woman is terrible because they go for the big CG monster thing and it just doesn't work.
Villain, yeah,
it was terrible. And loads of superhero films do that. And the great thing about this is that, like you said, one of the reasons you might prefer it to the second film is that it stays grounded. And as ludicrous as La Magra and everything is, the last sequence is still largely just a martial arts fight. And I think that's why it works.
The CGI is good in other places this as well, because obviously it looked a bit ropey when you had the blood thing, but when those weird skeleton bat things came out of the vampires, I think they looked all right, probably because you didn't see them much because they were going pretty fast. So, but I think they looked all right. And they like the one where the one pulls itself out of that vampire before he just turns into dust, and the way they turn into dust is actually really good. I think
it's okay for its age. I don't think it's amazing in 2023. But the fact is like every time I see any CG in this film, I'm like, I just wanted to go back to physical effects, because when I think of that last sequence, and you, like you said, you have like, where maybe some of the budget would have gone of skeletons flying out of vampires and dudes exploding and stuff. My favorite part of the film, other than of course, it's got one of the coolest landing sequences ever. You think about, again, Marvel films, and they're almost making fun of them now with the landing sequences. It all comes back to Blade. When he flips over, he lands, and then he catches the sunglasses. You're like, that's amazing.
Because he managed to do that whilst he's putting his bulletproof vest on.
Oh, it's so badass. But do you know what the coolest bit of that whole sequence is? It's when he's just kicking a guy on the ground. He just kicks fuck out of him. Then he gets super angry and kicks him again really hard. I'm just like, oh, dude, that scene is so badass.
I like this because you didn't see La Magra straight away either. Blade lands. You got La Magra just as a shadow in the background, and he just goes to Quinn, kill him. And Quinn's like, okay, I don't know which hand to kill you with. Okay, I'm going to lose my head. But at that scene as well, it sounds like it's going to start off with Mortal Kombat.
Yeah,
it does. Yeah, the music's total Mortal Kombat.
Missing again, not the jungling guy stuff, but Kombat as the guy runs towards and gets his head cut off.
I did read something pretty interesting about one of the reasons why Wesley Snipes took the role. He said he was really excited the fact that he could beat up people constantly through the whole film, but not be the bad guy. So in the films he's done previously, where he gets to do all of the action and stuff, he's the bad guy.
Yeah.
And people don't like that. So he got to be a good guy, but still beat the shit out of everyone. And he does it pretty well.
Do you think they would film and they're thinking, oh, he's kicking the shit out of that white guy again. Stop kicking him. Just on the floor, just booting shit.
I wish they'd use it. They use it quite sparingly, but for a couple, and it's not just that sequence. It's just before he punches someone, and they use almost like a screen shake to add to the impact. So he hits someone, and the whole screen shakes. Like, I don't think many films have used it since. I actually think it's really effective. But again, it all comes back to the fact that Wesley Snipes is just totally convincing as Blade. Like, he can clearly do all this stuff. He's just good at kicking people's ass. Yeah. It's the same reason that, whatever you might think of Keanu Reeves, that John Wick works is because he does all that stuff. Because he's pretty good at martial arts, but he's done the practice, he's done the work with the guns. So when you see it, you're like, oh, that's Keanu Reeves doing that. And in this, there's no hint, oh, that's a stunt person doing these fight sequences. Like, no, that's Wesley Snipes kicking fuck out of someone.
He looks great with the sword as well. And I wanted to mention the sword. The sword had that little trick in it, didn't it? Where the spikes would come out. And it took that guy's hand out. The one who said, I got his pig sticker. Yeah. Who coincidentally became one of the Night Stalkers in the other film.
Okay.
Yeah, but different character, same actor. What was funny was Deacon Frost saying, I know all your tricks. And he went, see, I know all your tricks. And he turned the switch off. Because it's a big on and off switch.
It is
on
pretty,
that sword. It's like, if you don't see that, there's something wrong. The thing is ticking as you're holding it. And there's a big on and off. Maybe go, oh, there's an off switch. It's not really difficult, is it?
No.
So,
no. So, but my issue with that, bizarrely, like you mentioned the sword, and his sword is awesome. Where does Deacon's sword come from at the end?
La Magra
did La Magra just bring a samurai sword? Because all of a sudden he has this showdown with Deacon at the end, or La Magra, whatever. And I'm like, wait a minute, where did that sword come from? Was he carrying a sword? There was no hint throughout the whole film that it's like, oh yeah, Deacon Frost totally rocks a samurai sword, and then all of a sudden he just has one,
and then he does this weird. I don't know what fighting Deacon Frost is doing, as he's waving his arms up and down like he's having a seizure.
It's brilliant, isn't it? The fact that he's obviously has the ability to be that fast and be almost untouchable. Yeah. At the end, he decides to hang in the air for what feels about 4 days.
He's the equivalent of the steamroller coming at the goon in Austin Powers. No, I was like, dude, how long? Like you said, so quick, but it really does give Blade every opportunity.
And he does that weird shake.
One thing we did skirt past pretty quickly, that whole fight scene where he beats up like 50 guys. The best part of that for me is when he rips the guy's throat out, then throws it at somebody else's face.
That was absolutely badass.
MacGruber.
Yeah.
No, it was one of those things. I was like, oh, I totally forgot he ripped a dude's throat out. And then when he threw it in someone's face, I was like, that's pretty badass. That is badass.
Yeah.
Although, I have to bring up one issue I have with this film. What was with the whole Blade's mother thing? I thought that was totally underwritten. I thought it was played suspiciously sexily, which I didn't really care for. I just thought, like you mentioned the fact that Karen couldn't be, I actually think Karen is completely essential to this film. His mother coming back as like a sexy vampire who's totally into Deacon for some reason, that I found very, very strange.
Well, he turned her, didn't he? So that's why she's there.
And
was he trying to create a Daywalker to make this happen?
So
has he been keeping her there to lure him back? Or is this just all some big coincidence which gets underplayed, as you say? And doesn't necessarily
I don't think it's a good, but it raises a good point. There's a scene before they chuck Karen into the pit where she sees the her old flame.
Yeah, my least favorite part of that.
Yeah, but they're talking to each other and they're going, did you know he would turn when you bit him? And you don't know if they're talking about Blade, or if they're
Mhm.
talking about the dude who's become some sort of rat thing at the bottom. Because if they're talking about Blade, then yes, he was planning a daywalker. He bit Karen while she was not Karen. He bit Blade's mother while she was pregnant.
Mhm.
But if they're just talking about that dude in the bottom, they've re-bitten a vampire or something and turned him into that. Like, I don't know which one they're talking about because it gives
It gets a bit messy.
and it gives two different connotations to the film. As you said, did Deacon Frost know he was turning and making a daywalker? Well, if that conversation is them talking about Blade, then yes, I think he did. But if they're talking about the dude at the bottom, because there's no stop, there's no name or anything. They have that conversation and they go, oh, by the way, meet an old friend, and they just push her in.
It seems to be the only reason to have her in the film because she doesn't really contribute anything to the story other than that.
Yeah.
And also, how does Blade look at her and remember her on her deathbed? I mean, he was just born, right?
Yeah.
He wouldn't have a memory of that.
But vampire powers, mate. Vampire powers. That's number 3 of the vampire power list. Just like really good memory.
And as soon as she got bit, he started remembering things in the womb. Just like, whoa, I'm in water.
What the fuck? This is crazy. This is great. Yeah, I fundamentally like that concept, and I think to your point, I think it does suggest that Deacon Frost knew what he was doing because it can't be a coincidence that he just kept her around, just happened to keep his mother around as like his special lady friend or whatever. But again, I feel like, and you get it in other parts of this film, that it is underwritten. And I think, again, going back to this film, that's maybe the reason why I think 2 is a better film. 2 is a better back-to-front film. When I was watching this, the bits that stood out were the bits that always stood out. It was the start and the end, which is still amazing. The middle section's fine, but it is just that. It's fine. Like there is an hour in this film when it's decent, but it's nothing special. But it's the fact that it's bookended by something special. Whereas I think the second film is maybe a bit more consistent as a movie. But that's up to debate, you know.
We forgot to mention as well, Dragonetti, played by perennial Eastern European bad guy Udo Kier.
Yeah.
Like if you need anyone to play Hitler, it's Udo Kier. But like he is Hitler in so many things lately. It's ridiculous.
He just looks like a bad guy, doesn't he?
In a low budget film, right?
Yeah.
I mean, these type of films, he doesn't fit well.
No, and you see him and you think, okay, they just needed to save some budget on something. Like,
well, they saved the budget with the special effects because when he burns on the beach or wherever the hell he is,
that was a bit sexual as well.
Well, I don't know. I just thought it was like
scene,
everything else. They're kind of pushing late 90s CGI, but when he melts, it looks very much 1979's Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is. I just thought that was.
Why does he melt? Does the sun make you melt? Because why does he melt and everyone else burn into ash? If he's dying, shouldn't he just? He
should have just exploded, and I don't think it was necessary. You know, you can get away with it in Lost Boys when you say, "Oh, you know, every vampire dies in a different way." But in this film, it appears that every single vampire dies in exactly the same way. They all just kind of disintegrate and explode.
But
whereas
I wonder
he kind of melted. I don't know. Seemed odd.
When you're killed, when you're beheaded or stabbed or something, you explode. That first bit of sunlight triggers you off. I wonder whether it just takes a little bit longer because it's just coming up.
So his outside is just melting a little bit.
Yeah, but doesn't they use the UV light, which is fundamentally the same as sunlight, and everyone just explodes?
Pearl starts, and then she
burns.
explodes, yeah.
Oh, she burns. Yeah, but what the fuck? I don't know what's going on with Pearl in this film, mate. I don't know what she's doing.
We didn't mention it right at the beginning of the film as well. His weird double-sided boomerang thing that he just manages to perfectly throw in a circle.
It's like a glaive, isn't it?
All those guys,
which he uses once, and you know, it's on the poster, isn't it? And the trailer and everything. You think it doesn't get enough out of that?
I love that because all those guys are the same height, obviously. Yeah, like that's the role of the henchman. As long as you're exactly the same height as the other guy, you're in. But that smile he gives, like it finally worked.
And I'm not sure about the head. Like that last sequence, there are a lot of henchmen, and that is maybe when this film feels the most comic booky. And I might only be saying that because they all look like Bob from Batman 1989. Yeah. They've all got like the weird hat, the black bomber jackets. They just look like peak 1990.
What I don't get as well is, when you become a vampire, obviously you've got the old guard, as you said, and you've got the new guys. But do you want to be turned into a vampire to become a henchman and to dress up the same? Like, you'd think they were just humans being paid, wouldn't you? But they're actual vampires. I don't understand. Oh, turn me, yeah, okay, give me a uniform and I'll just be your... No, I'm a fucking look, I'm a vampire now. I can do what I want. I can fuck
Still a
off.
hierarchy.
Yeah, it's still a hierarchy. You're still going to get a job, and especially with La Magra coming to town and turning everyone, you don't think you got to be you're a vampire, but somebody's got to fucking mop the floor, mate. You know, it's like
bin man. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
There's still some guy doing the taxes.
Yeah, nobody's really thought. It's like,
Bin
wait a
man's
minute.
getting a blow job as it's happening.
Yeah,
So, you know, it's fine.
I thought this La Magra thing was going to be amazing. Turns out it's just communism. It's like, what the fuck? What a massive, massive disappointment. I thought the fact that he was red was just a coincidence. I didn't think it was a political statement, for fuck's sake. Ridiculous. So are we done with... Should we go on to a favourite scene? Although I feel like everyone's going to have the exact same favourite scene, surely. It's going to be the opening sequence, right?
Mm.
It is, I mean, favourite scene, easy for me. As I said, you know, outside of like going to see The Raid and not knowing a huge amount about it, and like, you know, obviously you see those fight sequences and be like, holy shit, what am I watching? Sitting there and that opening sequence, the introduction of the character, the music, the choreography, everything about that opening sequence was perfect, remains perfect, easily the best scene in the film. The last scene is often great, but it has, like you say, some CGI issues, but that opening sequence is absolute money. So that's my favorite scene for sure, not even close.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying it's not the best. I'm not saying it's not the best scene in the movie, because it is.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, when favorite scene, I always think about scenes that make me laugh, and to me, it's in the hospital when those coppers shoot him. He goes, "What the fuck are you out of your damn mind?"
That's a great moment.
That's fucking fantastic. I think it's great, and that's when you see the coolness of Blade. In like, all right, he walked in, he just took out a load of people in a bloodbath, and for some reason, he is, I don't know, blood just slides off him and doesn't leave a stain. But in the hospital scene when those coppers shoot him, and then the way those coppers run away, like a Benny Hill sketch, both of them just go. I think it's great. So to me,
that's a great sequence, but it's hard to see past the first.
Oh no, I totally get it, and I totally
agree.
agree. That is the best scene in the film. That introduces the film, and you're already setting for a ride. I totally get it. But for me, my favorite scene is that one in the hospital.
It's a great scene. Great scene.
When Quinn gets up again and he says something, I'm probably speaking in his vampire tongue because I don't really know what he says. And then Blade goes, "Come back to finish you off," and then just punches a burnt, crisp man in the face.
Well, that was something I was going to say. Why does he set him on fire? Why doesn't he just kill him? He's got him pinned to a wall. Because he said, "I'm tired of chopping you up. Maybe I'll try fire this time." He knows how to kill him.
I think he just likes talking.
I think he likes fucking with him.
He's
Yeah,
just like a punching bag, isn't he? He's like the Leo Getz of.
He's like one of those squidgy ball things used for stress. Only as a vampire, you just beat the shit out of and set on fire. It's basically the same thing. In terms of loves and hates, shall I go first?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Number one, Snipes. The movie largely works because of him. As I say, it's a reasonably well directed film, but it does feel like a bit of a 90s film. Stephen Norrington, I mean, he went on to do League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which kind of put an end to his cinematic career for obvious reasons. I actually don't think that film's quite as bad as some people suggest, but yeah, he's no Guillermo del Toro. But number two, I think and it was the scene you mentioned there, the fact that it has its laughs, but it feels like a horror movie in that sequence, is the fact that they got the tone bang on. And it's something I would worry about a kind of MCU version of Blade for sure. And number three, the soundtrack. I mentioned the fact that when I think of this film, I think of the open sequence, I think of the end sequence, the two big action set pieces, and a massive part of that is the soundtrack. Shortest of its time, but it's still absolutely badass. So yeah, it is what it is.
So for me, it's Blade's clothing and his weaponry,
just loves a duster. He fucking loves a duster.
Amazing. He looks hard before he's even done anything.
Yeah.
He looks fantastic. The choreography, they brought in some pretty specialist martial arts guys to make Snipes look better than he was.
Yeah.
So when he hits someone, they do 400 flips in the air and spins, and every takedown looks amazing. So I thought the choreography was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one for me is the fact that they kept it as a grown-up Marvel film. They didn't try and rate it down to get more people to watch it. This is a full 18. It's violent. Mm-hmm. It's sweary, but it's dark. And I love that feel of the film.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
No, absolutely. The grittiness of it. And like I said, the coolness of it. When she says something like, "What are worse things out there than me?" And she goes, "Me." And it puts a sword. Like anyone else will stab themselves in the back. Me. Oh, my shoulder. But no, this dude is like fucking cool. And my three, to be fair, are a mix of both of yours, because Wesley Snipes, the Blade character, you can't differentiate the two. I think they're great. That includes the gear and everything as well. Every fight scene, I think, is really good. you've got the actual choreographed martial arts scenes, and you've got the one where he's just beating the shit out of a copper in her apartment. Like, I think that's good as well, because that dude's not a fighter. So Blade just punches him in the face, and he's just sticking him to the floor a bit.
Yeah, well, when he messes people up in this film, it really does feel like he's kicking the shit out of them. That's the difference, yeah.
Like, he's just got a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah, he's an angry man for sure.
So I'm going to mix two for my third one, because the grittiness of the film, but that grittiness includes Chris Christopherson, because that dude is grubby. Like, that dude is just a grubby, angry man. And
you can smell Chris Christopherson through the
that
screen.
Dude has not washed his hair in I don't know how long, unless he's washed it with petrol.
Yeah,
like, because. But I think he's great in this.
Great voice as well. Such a great voice.
Yeah.
Like him and Blade is just gravel on gravel, isn't it? It's unbelievable.
They're chewing nails for breakfast.
Oh, yeah. In terms of hates, the CG was always a tad rough, and it remains so in 2023. I already mentioned it, Deacon's plan. I know we've kind of half explained it, but I'm still not sure about his whole La Magra thing. And nothing ages this movie quite like Mercury. She just looks like something out of a late 90s music video. And also, as we mentioned, she's a bit rubbish. So those are my three hates of the film.
Clothes, didn't she?
What's that?
She needed some clothes.
Well, she just needed there's something about tall, statuesque women wearing all white, which just screams late 90s to me.
She just had, I don't know, like duct tape around her front, duct tape around her, and then a weird half a jacket. Like, I
mean, that's fine. I mean, vampires are supposed to be sexy and stuff like that. Her being underdressed isn't my issue so much as the fact that, like I said, she just looks of a time.
Yeah.
And, but that's okay because the movie was 1998. What's not acceptable is the fact that she's really, really bad in this film.
Dave hate?
Yeah, so similar to you, Lee, the shonky VFX. Mm-hmm. I mean, the only saving grace for this film is, as you said, it's used pretty sparingly, so it doesn't spoil the film, but they're not great. The biggest thing that I hated in this film was the weird zombie vampire in the basement. It's just a bit shit. It doesn't need to be there. It's like a minute's worth of film. You think, did they need to have that in there? It doesn't really add anything.
Also, how because he was human at the beginning.
Yeah.
How does he become a zombie vampire so quickly?
That's what he said, doesn't it? Sometimes the vampirism doesn't quite take, and then this is what happens to him.
But that's what I was saying. Was he talking about that guy, or was he talking about Blade? They don't know who you're talking about. So
well, if we assume they're talking about Blade, I think the reason that sequence is in there is because they need a bit of exposition to explain what's happening. And they're like, well, we need something interesting to happen for the exposition to work on screen. It's like, well, let's just throw her in a pit with that guy who got bitten at the start of the film. I think that might be it. We're just like, we can't just have... we need somebody to explain this to her so that the audience knows what's going on. So they've kind of forced this into the film, but I totally know what you mean. It's the whole thing about him and his weird zombie state isn't really explained. It's thrown in out of nowhere. It's not really required.
They've got no balls.
Yeah.
That need to be there.
You were talking about like gravel as well. It's like all they were feeding that guy was rocks.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
It was almost like a comedy zombie, wasn't it? It was very strange.
It didn't need to be. Probably not a hate, but you've got this whole council of pretty high up vampires. You think they'd have their own legion of security and people, but no, they killed Dragonetti and they all just give up and it just all seemed a bit convenient, just think you'd have a bit more fight out of them.
Yeah, they were very passive about it all and very scared of Deacon, and I'm not quite sure why. Because, as I say, he kind of shows up at the end and he's got people with him, but for the most part, it's just him and Quinn, and Quinn's a fucking dope. Yeah. So it's just like, why are you so worried about this guy? But
that'll lead into my three, starting off with what they need to do to move the story forward, because they fold so quickly. They're meant to be the guys that everyone's afraid of, but as soon as the one dude gets taken out, the rest of them just fold. Like you said, there's no security for them, and then they're all just stood in a line, and they all get turned into weird skeletal vampire things. Yeah, all of that just to move the story forward seemed a bit pony. So the old guys, the council or whatever they were for me. Secondly, Karen. I just could not.
So harsh. So harsh on Karen.
I couldn't get on with her. I always, every time I watch this film, I think this film is great. I can't get on with Karen. I can't do it. She just she's annoying to me. She really is. And
she is a Karen.
She is a Karen.
She is a Karen, yeah. The name's there, in fairness.
The last thing is, the location of the Lamagra Temple.
Yeah. I do. Where is it? It feels very much like, the hole in The Dark Knight Rises, where you're like, wait, where is this underground hole, and how does Bruce Wayne get back to Gotham?
It happens to have been there exactly where they are, where he wants to do it and everything.
Yeah.
When they get out,
It's like, it literally suggests like it's just downstairs.
but when they climb out of it as well at the end, and they're in some weird,
It's like a building site. Isn't it?
yeah, red, dusty building site on the outskirts of town. Maybe like, is that why they? I was convenient. Oh yeah, it turns out it is in New Orleans. It's fine. This is
Yeah.
It's
Of all the places, Jesus Christ, this is
the Lamagra
convenient.
Temple is here. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just, again, something to move the story forward. It's things that you can overthink or you don't need to think about. I mean, it happened to move the story forward.
Yeah.
It gave you a great cinematic experience. The fight scenes were at the end of it. I tried to do that with a straight face. Liam's calling me a motherfucker. But yeah, I don't know. It just
No, I get it. And some things are always going to, like from a narrative perspective, are going to suffer a little bit because the emphasis is clearly on Blade, which is correct because, it's the star of the film. But it's almost like they've bitten a bit more than they could chew. And it's like, I don't want a longer version of this film. Like it's nearly 2 hours, admittedly. And it's like, I don't think it needs to be any longer, but I think we just have to accept that some things aren't amazingly explained in this film. And there are some things which are just purely a convenience. And you're just like, all right, fair enough. And admittedly, it's only, the 8th time I've watched this film and for a podcast that I've really thought, oh, wait a minute, what the fuck's going on here? The other times I really didn't give a shit. So yeah, we'll give it the benefit.
It sounds like you're really clutching at straws trying to find something to put into hate here because I mean, I've already told you what my ratings are going to be.
You're being super critical because you have to.
I don't know, man. You put Karen on the list of all the things you'd be critical about. Going after Karen, unbelievable. Oh, thank you. Sorry, I shouldn't have said thank you out loud. My wife just brought me tea, so that was just very nice. Do we have? Are there any alternative titles for this film?
There are, yeah.
Unbelievable.
There's a couple. There's one problematic one, but I'll save that one till the end. So Argentina, Blade, Vampire Hunter.
That's fine, yeah.
Poland, Blade, Eternal Hunter.
Not first.
Turkey, Two Sides of the Blade.
No, it's terrible. You said that like we should like it.
No,
I hate it. Hate it.
It makes no sense.
No, it's appalling.
The Blade.
It was just your tone in the way it's like, wait, guys, how about this one? It's shit.
Vietnam, Demon Hunter.
Yeah.
Taiwan, Blade Warrior.
No, doesn't work.
So my last one is a bit problematic because I don't know if Google Translate is being a bit racist. Okay, because
Here we go.
You put the Japanese version in.
Yeah.
It comes out with, I'm gonna have to spell it, BRAID.
Braidu. Yeah, but and I've mentioned this before. Like, if you watch like a lot of Japanese TV shows and stuff, when they throw in English words, it just sounds like somebody just doing a racist impersonation of someone from Japan, where because they have those vowel sounds at the end of their words, so they just take the English word and then add the vowel sound, so you end up with Braidu rather than Blade.
But they add those words like that. That's what it sounds like. But the translator the translation is Braid, BRAID.
Okay, so we're suggesting that Google's racist, yeah?
Well, I mean,
if the shoe fits, But if someone asked me, like, oh, what do people in Japan call Blade? I'd probably be like, they'd probably call it Bladeu. Like, I know it's the R makes it more racist. In fairness.
You're saying Blade, but this is R. It's Braid.
Yeah, it does. It does sound quite racist.
Like Kim Jong Un from Team America World Police. Ironi. Yeah.
Oh, Braidu. Oh, my favorite movie, Braidu. All right, let's move on. We've already had Jimmy Savile on this podcast. Now we've got fucking Braidu. Are there any others?
No, that's it, mate. That's it.
I'm so glad we end on that one. Do you have any facts of this film?
I do, but I'll give the guess because he just pulled out his notepad.
Jesus Christ, this could be a 4-hour podcast.
Yeah, doesn't mean they're any good. Unfortunately, Wes has already spoiled the first one.
Son of a bitch.
Try to get him in when you want.
Pearl originally ate children and infants, especially like the hearts. Hence, his size was originally there were going to be lots of kids. Literally,
that actually makes me like. I know it's gross, but it makes more sense because when I'm watching it on the screen, it's like, why is Pearl, he, she, whatever, so fat? Like, there's just no explanation. But if he was surrounded by half-eaten dead babies, it'd be gross. But I'd be like, yeah, that'd do it.
And again, not to jump on the old racist bandwagon, but he is below the Asian, what looks like a paedophile market.
Oh,
I mean, there's some pretty young-looking women.
Oh, I can't believe we didn't mention that.
around.
Was really weird. Like, why was it like a Yakuza bar and then the whole like Japanese under it, which, you know, Japanese are pretty suspect with all that anyway. But that whole sequence was just weird. It was just weird.
So I'm guessing had a fresh supply from upstairs when they were done with them.
Yeah.
Oh, God, so that's a much darker movie for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Stan Lee was originally going to do a cameo. He was going to be one of the cops who found Quinn just after he'd been burned.
Oh, it's a bit of a shame he wasn't in it.
But it was removed for unknown reasons. We don't know why.
Well, I guess again, I think it just comes down to the fact that they weren't selling this as a comic book movie.
Yeah.
It was almost by chance that it was based on a comic book movie, in the same way that you would kind of like have a film based on a book. Like, first and foremost, they're like, well, we're making a horror movie about just a super cool character. I don't think they cared if anyone knew if it was a comic book movie.
I kind of think as well, not a lot of people knew Stan Lee
At that point.
back then.
Yeah.
I mean, if you didn't watch Mallrats the year before, then you probably didn't know Stan Lee was. So to see a 90-year-old patrol officer come in going, what's going on here? Like,
Well, it's different. Like, if you're making X-Men in 2000, and sure, comic book movies still weren't mega popular back there, but X-Men are in the public consciousness. Everyone knows who the X-Men are. Even if they don't know everything about the characters, if they hear X-Men, even in 2000, like, well, they're comic book characters. I think you could ask 100 people on the street in 1998 who Blade is, and maybe none of them would know who he was. I was into comic books. I didn't know who fucking Blade was.
Yeah.
So, yeah, hail.
So the vampire language was created specifically for the film. It was made by a professor in UCLA.
Oh, fair enough.
That is a genuine language that was made there.
nice.
Blade was nearly played by LL Cool J in the early 90s.
Oh, dear.
That would have been a different type of film.
That would have been like more like Sticky Fingers, wouldn't it? Let's be clear.
Yeah, definitely. The actual shortlist for this film to play Blade was Denzel Washington, Wesley Snipes, and Lawrence Fishburne. And I'm just really glad that they didn't go with Denzel Washington, because this would be a 0 out of 5 film.
Whoa, Jesus Christ. You can't just go saying something ridiculous like,
I absolutely despise Denzel Washington.
oh my fucking days. I mean, he brings a different vibe to this film, because Denzel Washington is clearly a much better actor than Wesley Snipes. And that's not criticizing Wesley Snipes. Like, Denzel Washington is one of the greatest actors of his generation. He doesn't bring the same kind of physicality. Like, you don't have the same kind. It's a different movie with Denzel Washington. And like you, I mean, I'm all on board for. And I know Denzel Washington did. What were the recent action films he did? The Equalizer.
Yeah.
And he's quite convincing in those films, but he doesn't have the martial arts background like Wesley
Imagine
Snipes.
if they went with Lawrence Fishburne. My argument of it, The Matrix didn't copy this would be out with the water, wouldn't it? Motherfucker, they got
No, needless to say,
Well, maybe Snipes would have been in The Matrix.
Yeah.
You never know.
that could have worked.
Yeah.
It totally could have worked, but hey-ho.
Deacon Frost was first offered to Jet Li, but he turned it down to do Lethal Weapon 4.
Again, that could have worked. I mean, again, it's a completely different vibe. But from a martial arts perspective, obviously, you have a better final fight sequence with Jet. Like, I don't think they just have the bit when he kind of waves his arms around and then jumps a blade. Like, if Jet Li's in this film, you have a full-on fight sequence at the end. But he doesn't have that kind of same 90s cool that Deacon Frost, that Stephen Dorff, brought to the character.
No, just his acting ability wasn't there. I mean, you wouldn't.
No.
He doesn't. Jet Li's a great fighter and he's great at martial arts and things. But he doesn't have any screen presence. He doesn't have the cool factor. You wouldn't have the same sort of dialogue between him and Blade. It just wouldn't have worked.
No, I think the fact that Deacon Frost and Blade are both really cool, but in very different ways, I think works for the film.
And my last fact, but probably one of the funniest ones, is Donal Logue actually dislocated his jaw, screaming vigorously.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
Yeah.
I mean, that is a commitment to the role.
It was the scene where they were where he was burned to a crisp. People are screaming around him, so he tried to scream louder than them. So his jaw just fell off.
Wow.
I honestly, I mean, I'm not sure how you would do it, but I feel like this is a Mythbusters special. Like, could somebody scream until they dislocated their own jaw?
Have you ever yawned so hard your jaw doesn't come back?
Lockjaw.
Yeah. So you yawn so hard, you go, like, I mean, that was good on a podcast, wasn't it?
Did that actually happen to you?
Yeah.
Oh, gee, that's never happened to me.
Oh, fucking hurts, dude.
Yeah, it sounds like it sucks, but yeah, I wasn't aware that you could scream until you basically dislocated, broke your own jaw. That's insane. But cool fact, though, if it is indeed a fact. But, you know, like I said, I want to see the Mythbusters version of this.
Well, we'll call a bit of scrutiny. I got a couple more. Have you got any before I go on?
No, go for it.
Well, Dave actually did really well. He stole most of them, so I've only got.
I thought you were just like giving him like a really condescending pat on the back. Dave did really well, didn't he? Good job with the facts, buddy.
Didn't we do that in our first one when you came in? I gave you a good one.
Yeah, it's like you can't see it, but he's actually scratching him behind his ear right now.
So only two from me. So the first one, Michael Morbius, they recently did a film with Jared Leto. Well, Michael Morbius, the living vampire, I think he's called. He was originally to be used as the main antagonist in Blade 2, but the idea was dropped when Marvel sold the character rights to Artisan Entertainment to produce a standalone Morbius film, which took, 22 years, 23 years?
Wasn't worth it, by the way.
No, I haven't seen it, and I'm not going to. And there's a deleted scene in this where when they get out of Lamagra's headquarters, there's a vampire staring at them from a rooftop. And it's meant to be Morbius to set up the sequel.
Oh, I see.
Played by Stephen Norrington, the director.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So again, like I said, they were going to do Morbius. That would have been a whole different film because Morbius again is kind of like an anti-hero as well.
Oh yeah, it's a completely different film if they haven't the sequel.
You're a bad guy. I'm a bad guy. Oh, you have the same mother. It's friends.
It feels like one of those ones you're setting up like they have a fight, but then they team up at the end to fight the greater evil kind of bullshit.
And the last one for me. The Blobulous Vampire Pearl took 4 people to perform. 1 at the head, 1 at each arm, and 1 operating the feet. He's surrounded by used blood bags and debris, but originally, again, to be dead children.
Well, the thing is, like you said, from a technical perspective, it looks convincing. It looks cool. I'm just not sure if it's required in the film.
Can you imagine with 4 people in that? 1 at the legs, 1 at each arm, and 1 at the head. Who farted?
Just yeah. There's something unpleasant going behind the scenes there. In terms of the legacy, I mean, obviously, I guess it does have quite an important legacy. We've already mentioned its place as, you know, a black superhero film and its position as kind of reigniting interest in comic book movies on the screen. But it's also one of the few cases where we have different opinions on this, where the sequel is actually better than the original. I actually think this number 2 is a slightly better film, but it's close. It's an Alien versus Aliens thing, Godfather 1 versus Godfather 2. You could catch me on different days. But the fact that this had a very successful follow-up, you know, there were certainly back then, there weren't many films which had great sequels. It's just such a shame that the drop-off from 2 to 3 was as horrendously bad as it was, because that just killed the franchise just dead in the water. But it is what it is. What else is it? We've already mentioned there was a Pretty Whatever TV show where they tried to bring it back with Sticky Fingers. I'm still not getting over that name. There's the MCU version with Mahershala Ali. We mentioned earlier, going back to the drawing board. I think that's a good thing. And one of the things we talked about, you know, in the build-up to when we kind of revealed we were going to do this as our next movie on the last podcast, was this feels like the perfect movie to have like the equivalent of a DC Elseworlds movie. Like the Marvel movies now, they're running into the issue where everything's connected, and if you miss something, it's like, is it worth going back? They're kind of writing themselves into corners. Like, just have a Blade movie. Have it, you know, you've established the multiverse. Just in the same way, I'm sure they'll do something similar with Deadpool and Wolverine. It's going to be a different version of Wolverine. Deadpool, they can kind of, you know, with Deadpool, the great thing is you can pick and choose what you want to use from the different universes. It doesn't matter. It's a comedy. Just have Blade sit in its own universe in the same way that the Joker does, in the same way that Robert Pattinson's The Batman does. Just have, and you use the correct terms, violent and sweary. We all want another violent and sweary Blade film. We don't want a watered down version of this film. It would be horrible.
If they must insist on connecting them to something, I don't know why they don't do the Marvel Knights. The Marvel Knights are the darker side of the Marvel comic book universe. So you've got, I've already said them, Ghost Rider, Daredevil, Punisher, Blade, and a couple of others. So you can have
a skull guy on a bike, a blind guy, and Blade.
And a dude that just loves guns.
Yeah, but you're creating a separate Marvel universe. I don't even want to see other Marvel characters. I just want it to be a Blade movie.
No, but what I'm saying,
I want it to be just a horror film.
I want it to be a Blade movie, but if they insist on cashing in something, do the Marvel Knights universe and just leave all these 12-year-old things on their own and just
Mhm.
start having a violent and sweary. I have to say as well because now all three of us have a violent and sweary.
You could, like, I know they've crossed over now, but that's what they did basically with the Netflix shows for a while. Like, they had the tiniest of hints that this was happening in the same universe, but they made it clear that this is lower level stuff, so why would Iron Man and Captain America give a fuck? So that's fine. Iron Man and Captain America exist in this universe, but they allowed their shows to be a lot darker and a lot grittier because they kept within their own confines, didn't they? Where it was like Daredevil and all that stuff. It's like, do the same.
Involved in vampires. You know, I'm going to come in with my shield and just attack a vampire.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like these films would benefit. Everything doesn't have to be a world-ending thing. It could just be a smaller scale. Just make it a fucking Blade film of him just dealing with vampires around the world. Don't get the rest of the narrative involved and allow it to, like you said, be an 18. Like, you know, just be like, all right, this exists outside that world.
I wonder,
or even like if it does exist, make it the lightest of touches.
I wonder if it can be a bit more violent because they're vampires. So once you stab them, they don't die and bleed, and they just puff of smoke.
Yeah.
So I wonder
Yeah, but like, it's not just about violence. It's not just about having blood, because this film doesn't, like you said, the vampires all explode. It's the tone. It needs to have an adult tone. And I keep coming back to the fact that this film feels like it was established fundamentally from horror roots. And that's what I prefer it to feel like. I want it to feel like closer to a horror film than it does a comic book movie. And I hope they retain that.
I think you're not going to get what you want, to be fair.
Well, like I said, that was but the only positive I'm taking is the fact that they looked at the screenplay, they got so far into production, and they went back to the drawing board. And I know that's been annoying for the star of the film, but the fact that they've clearly looked at it and gone, listen, we need to do something different. And I think Marvel are in the perfect position now to really do something different, because this phase 4, 5, whatever the fuck it is, clearly isn't hitting the same kind of heights as the previous ones. I think people, myself included, are losing interest in the larger narrative. Just make cool Marvel films. They don't all have to be interconnected. And a big part of that could start Blade. Again, I've mentioned bookends a bunch of times in this podcast. Could bookend the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You have Blade starting it, and then you have Blade essentially going, well, we're going in a different direction now from now on. I don't think it'll happen, like you said, but it'd be cool if it was.
You're going to lose an interest. You start going on about Marvel. I think Dave's gone to sleep. Dave, wake up.
Sorry.
Come on.
Sorry.
I know, fair enough. In terms of music and score, I mean, the soundtrack is certainly more memorable than Mark Islam's score, which is fine, but kind of gets lost amidst the techno beats. But it's it's varied, very varied, the soundtrack. Because I remember, again, having the CD when I was younger. But for the most part, I think people remember the two tracks. It's the Blood Rave track by, I think it's called Confusion by New Order, and Playing with Lightning by Expansion Union at the final scene. And I think when people think of music in this film, I still think they think of those two pieces of music. But then there's also the really weird Yakuza dance club singing Schoolgirls in there too. I don't know what that song is, but yeah, like the score. And I was like, I can't even remember the score for this film. I listened to a bit of it in and of itself. It's fine, but it's the soundtrack that steals the show.
I can't see, again, I said most of this, it makes me think of any jungling guy. But the other thing is when you go to that Yakuza scene, it sounds like any song from the Fast and Furious 3, Tokyo Drift.
It does. Or it reminds me of that the weird scene from Serenity.
Yes.
Another song that kind of puts Summer into a trance. It's got that vibe.
Doki Bar or whatever it's called.
Yeah. In terms of video games, there was a Blade game for PlayStation 1 and Game Boy Color. Surprisingly, the Game Boy Color version was the much better version. And, if you go back to like the PlayStation 1, all those kind of third-person action games are actually pretty bad. And this was a mediocre one back in like 1998. So unsurprisingly, horrendous today. Bizarrely, he's not been in many of the Marvel games. I thought Blade must have surely shown up in, say, like Marvel versus Capcom, where they all have all the characters, and he would lend himself so well to a fighting game. Doesn't appear in it. I assume it's something to do with a rights issue, but as to what that is, fuck knows.
He's rocked up in the latest one, haven't he? Forgotten Sons.
Yeah, that's the one I was going to say. Like, he has shown up in that. It's just a shame that nobody's taken interest in that game. So it is what it is. In terms of if I was going to make an actual Blade game, something made on this film, my immediate thoughts were like, all right, maybe I'd like Platinum Games or the Capcom team who did Devil May Cry. Those seem obvious, but those films get maybe a little bit too flashy because, as you said, like most of the fighting in this is relatively grounded. So I've settled on. Have you heard of the game Sifu by Slow Clap?
I'll answer that for both of us.
No. Well, it was recently released for PS5, and I think it's moved over to the Xbox and stuff now. But it's basically just a bunch of fight sequences. but they're absolutely amazing. Again, very grounded, very brutal. I think if you just put a Blade skin on that and have him fighting vampires, I think it totally works. You guys should totally check that game out. I think you'd really like it, but that's what I go with.
Any for you? If you were going to have a Blade game?
I don't do games.
No.
I don't do games. I don't do comic book movies.
Yeah. Children.
I don't play games, you fucking nerds.
If Dave was going to have a Blade game, it'd be based on Rockstar.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah.
Oh, is it called Rockstar?
Yeah. There was two. There was like Rockstar and there was Guitar Hero.
Yeah.
Guitar Hero.
Yeah.
You could probably turn those dance tracks into Guitar Hero tracks. That'd be fucking awesome.
Right, you for me, you kind of brushed over a little bit. Devil May Cry, I would base it around like the Devil May Cry side, but I would do once again a game that didn't get much love is the Devil May Cry remake by Ninja Theory.
Oh, that was awesome. That got so much bad rap because his hair wasn't fucking blonde. It was nonsense. That game's really good.
But I think that could be like a Blade skin. I think that would work very well. The fight.
Yeah, and I actually think you're right because you immediately think Devil May Cry because of the combat, but the tone is actually closer to the Ninja Theory version of Devil May Cry. That's actually much closer to what. So yeah, I think I think you're on something there. Not just Devil May Cry, but specifically the Ninja Theory version of Devil May Cry as a Blade game would absolutely work.
So
I think that's a great job.
Am I 3 for 3?
I think you're 3 for 3. For someone who's not into video games, you're fucking slaying. In terms of,
I just bring up one word and he goes, "Fuck me, you won."
I really do think about it, and he just wins every week. In terms of, I mean, you've already ruined your score and recommendations.
Yeah, should I go first then?
Yeah, go for it, mate.
Yeah. It's a 4, and yes, I would recommend it. If somebody's not into comic, I wouldn't even recommend it as a comic book film. It's just an action film. It's just a vampire film. It's great to watch. It still holds up today. There's only some little bits of ropey CGI that kind of date it. But no, I highly recommend it, and it's a 4 for me.
Yeah, exactly the same. 4 stars. Easy to recommend. There, like I said, there's the CG moments, and there are a couple of moments throughout the scene when it has that, as I said, that music video vibe, like with the way some of the scenes are shot. But for the most part, it's well choreographed. The music works. Wesley Snipes still looks absolutely badass. Like I said, the whole him being in a duster could have aged this film, but it's Wesley Snipes in the duster, so it doesn't fucking matter. So yeah, it still looks great. So yeah, 4 stars, totally recommend.
Yeah, I totally agree. 4 stars for me. It's a brilliant film, and I would recommend it to anyone. And as you say, to me, it's not a Marvel film. It's just an all-out action film. It's very grown up, very very exciting to watch. Does dip a little bit in the middle, so I think it doesn't grip you from beginning to end. So it's not quite a 5 star, but yeah, I'd recommend it to anyone.
Yeah, I did. Like I said, when I was thinking about this film before I went back and rewatched it, I thought, God, it's strange that I only really remember the beginning and the end of this film. And there is a reason for that. The middle is fine. It's never bad. This film is never bad. But it dips into 3-star quality around for like 30, 40 minutes. But, you're hinting towards 5-star quality at the beginning and the end, so it's fine.
You get the 5-star and you get the 3-star, it becomes a 4.
It really does. But that makes it feel like it's more of a conversation. As a whole, this is so bang on a 4-star movie. It's not even, So, well, that's nice. We all agreed. That's lovely. So what are we doing next week?
We're sticking with the 90s next week. I wanted to do this film for ages, but I've decided we're finally going to do it because I've lost
The Matrix.
Did you know The Matrix kind of copied ideas from Blade?
Supposedly, yeah.
No, we're doing a Quentin Tarantino written film.
Okay,
one of his first, and no, it wasn't Dusk Till Dawn.
We've already done that. I think that's a great shout because that's one of those films I have fond-ish memories of, but I think I've only ever seen it once. And I really like. I couldn't give you a full synopsis of that film anymore. I've not seen it for so long, and I know it's beloved, but as to whether it holds up, I legitimately have no idea.
You want to talk problematic? Gary Oldman.
That is the one thing I remember. Like, and it's one of the things that it's going to come up next week, but I love it when you get like a really talented actor doing something genuinely batshit. And I'm not sure if we've ever had a more talented actor doing something more batshit than what Gary Oldman does in that film. It's insane.
You've never seen it, Dave. So Gary Oldman is a Jamaican.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. What the fuck do you do with that? If you haven't seen it, you have to go back and rewatch it. So yeah, if you get the opportunity, do go back and rewatch True Romance and join us next week. But this has been Blade. Next week is True Romance. Thank you for joining us, Dave. And I guess we'll talk to you again soon. Cheers, guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah, thanks for joining, Dave, and we'll see you next week. Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Oh, and before we forget, here is Rob with all the finer details. Got to get through those, dude.
Yeah, so basically you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at HeyYouGuys80s. We're also on email at HeyYouGuys80s@gmail.com. Please feel free to drop us any recommendations, any corrections or omissions we may have missed from any of the films that we've covered. Just get them in. And also, if you could, please leave us some 5-star reviews. That would really help us. And we'd like to thank, as always, Darry Fletcher at Darry Doodles for the fantastic artwork that we're now producing. Thanks for that, mate.
Cheers, Darry.
Yeah. And thanks again for listening, and we will see you next week.
Cheers. Bye.